Hello and welcome to Retrospect, the weekly podcast from Sky Sports News, which brings you detailed analysis from the weekend's Premier League action in the company of our very own reporters and special guests from the game as well. With me, Rob Jones, this week is our Merseyside reporter, Vinny O'Connor. You look more presentable. When you walked in, I thought you tracked across the Antarctic today. You were sort of a Michelin man. How many layers?
It's so cold today.
Yeah,
I
cold.
drive an electric car as well. I need to keep the charge preserved.
Well, you're well turned out now. And alongside myself and Vinny, the former Manchester United, Tottenham and England striker, Fraizer Campbell. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
We promised you as we warmed up for this show that I was going to put you on the spot with a little quiz question that I was asked recently. Since 2000, there are 41 players who've won one England cap. You are one of them. Can you name any of the others?
I think I've seen David Nugent was one of them.
David Nugent, one cap, one goal. One of the worst international goals ever, from about a yard.
Is that it? I've got it right.
There are 39 others, but we're not going to go through all of them. Any more?
I can't think of the top of my head.
Tell you what, if any pop into your mind throughout the course of the show, just yell them. Any more from you, Vinny?
Not at the moment.
Okay, good. We'll carry on. The good news about having only half of the Premier League teams in action is it's quite easy to pick which games you cover. We just do all of them. So we'll start with Manchester United against Tottenham and what Sir Jim Ratcliffe might have learnt from being at Old Trafford for the first time yesterday. Vinny O'Connor with a big rant against VAR last week. Vinny Company with a big rant about VAR this week as Burnley are denied victory against Luton. Chelsea managed to win for the third time in a row for the first time this season and advertise Todd Bowley's new film all in the same afternoon. Vinny O'Connor witnesses history at Goodison Park with Unai Emery's first ever 0-0 draw in the Premier League. And in the least surprising news of the weekend, we find out that Kevin De Bruyne is actually quite good at football as Manchester City beat Newcastle. But we will start with the Fraizer Campbell derby at Old Trafford yesterday. Manchester United 2, Tottenham 2. Would it be fair to say, Fraizer, that it's Tottenham that come out of it with more credit and Manchester United with more questions?
Well, going into the game, I think Spurs have had the better run of form of late, and everyone thought, if Man United don't turn up to some sort of level, they're going to get steamrolled. And they started the game really well, Man United, and, I think some of the Man United fans will argue that they were disappointed they couldn't hold on to the win because the two goals that Spurs scored, even though they hit the bar and they had all of the possession basically, they give away sloppy goals. So it was a good game for the neutral. Obviously, I'm a Man United fan, so I was unlucky. I was upset, that McTominay missed that one right at the end. But it was a good game, to be fair, and I think a draw was fair overall.
On the subject of Sir Jim Ratcliffe, look, I'm sure he'd have been watching and listening and making inquiries as to what was going on at the club. Do you think that he would have seen the scale and the size of the task to get Manchester United where they feel they should be?
I think so, Rob. I think it was interesting to hear the discussion after the game. I hadn't seen all the action throughout, but I picked up on what Fraizer said there about the goals that United conceded. Certainly Betancourt's goal, seeing United outnumbered in midfield the way they were, or certainly not getting back into shape and seeing runners. I mean, Betancourt goes into the box all by himself, completely not picked up. And I think that kind of led to the discussion that we saw on Sky Sports after the game, and the likes of Gary Neville, Roy Keane saying what we aren't seeing from Manchester United at the moment is any kind of identity. And Fraizer, does that worry you? Do you see that same thing?
Yeah, definitely. You see the cities, you see the way they're set up, the way they play, the Arsenals, but week in, week out, you go to Manchester, at Old Trafford, and you don't know what's going to show up. They show glimpses of some like counter-attacking football, breaking with pace with like Garnacho, Rashford, but it's not consistent enough. And it's Man United over the years. You expect to see a certain style of play, and it's not quite got there yet, and it is frustrating to watch.
Because I've said in mitigation for Erik ten Hag, there's been a number of injuries at Manchester United, and that therefore makes it difficult to implement that kind of identity. But at the same time, we saw a Spurs side yesterday who've had injuries themselves, and yet Ange Postecoglou has got an identity. He plays the same way and emphasises that message week in, week out.
No, yeah, exactly. Having players injured is just an excuse. Everyone should know the roles, the way the team plays, regardless who's in the starting 11. So it is a concern that they can't keep any consistency because, like you're saying, there's teams out there that have suffered a lot through injuries and they've managed to find a way.
When we talk about identity then, Sir Alex Ferguson, who would have given you your Manchester United debut, when he brought new signings in, how quickly did he expect the penny to drop? Not everyone is going to come straight in and from game one be there, but how soon were you supposed to be right up to speed with it?
Well, straight away, more or less. I don't think he's got the most patience in the world, but it does happen sometimes. Watch Evra and Vidic when they first came, and they were up to standard at all, but it took them a good maybe half season to get fully embedded, and then they went on. But I think with Sir Alex, he knew the players. He picked the players that he knew had the right characters that would not fall in line, but get on board and be an asset to the team. And whether they started playing well straight away or not, he knew that they would finally get there. And with many of his signings, he was always proved right.
When we talk about characters as well, though, and there's a lot of people saying at the moment, you know what it means to play for Manchester United, people talking about the culture in the dressing room. I look back to your debut last night as to who was playing, and you had Giggs and you had Scholes, and Vidic was playing as well. Was it quite easy to know what was expected of a Manchester United player when you have those legends of the club around you?
Yeah, definitely. I was saying this yesterday. I was watching Haaland up front, and young lad comes to Man United. He's trying to learn, and he's under a massive microscope. There's a lot of pressure, and for him, it would be nice to have one or two. Just one would be nice. Veteran striker that he could, lean on. Maybe he could take the brunt of the pressure and day to day learn bits from him and improve his own game. But he's not got that. Like saying when I was there was Van Nistelrooy, Solskjaer, Zaha, Rooney was there, Tevez. So there was loads.
Quite good those players.
They were half decent players, to be fair. Yeah.
And what did you do as a young striker then with someone like Van Nistelrooy? Did you just watch him? Did you go and after training say, Ruud, what do you do in this situation?
Ruud, can you sign this, please? No, I was there from 10, so Man United was my team. So going in day to day and rubbing shoulders with these guys was you're just in awe of them. And it was brilliant that I could, watch Ruud. Like Solskjaer used to take finishing sessions, and the standard was incredibly high. So if he wasn't having a good training session, you're like, no, not today. So, or they are missing out. But it was great for a youngster to just be around them was enough for me. But they were all great characters, great leaders, and they were looking out for people like myself, young lads that were trying to learn how to be like they were, and they always had time for us. So it was essential for me to learn how to be a top striker around them guys.
And just on the point of the forwards then, only Palace, Burnley and Sheffield United have scored fewer than Manchester United this season. Is it a case that at the moment the forward players Erik ten Hag has don't fit together? So Højlund doesn't suit Anthony, and Anthony doesn't suit Rashford or whatever it might be.
I think with them guys, they're all pretty young, and they don't. I don't feel like they know.
A Tottenham perspective, Jamie Weir covers a lot of Tottenham and joins us now. Jamie, we're talking about all these problems Manchester United have in scoring goals. No such issues for Ange's great entertainers, is there?
No, I mean, they just keep on going from strength to strength despite the number of people they have missing. And yes, I know that Spurs aren't alone in that. I know a lot of clubs in the Premier League have got a number of players missing at the moment. But you look at that side yesterday, 4/5 guaranteed starters weren't there. Heung-min Son, James Maddison, Dejan Kulusevski, either Yves Bissouma or Pape Sarr, whoever you would have in your midfield. I mean, you're talking about 5 players there who not only walk straight into the Tottenham team, but into most teams in the Premier League. Of the side of the players that did start yesterday, Christian Romero, Mickey van de Ven not match fit. It was their first game back in weeks/months. Destiny Udogie and Ollie Skip had been sort of nursing tummy bugs all week, so weren't at full fitness. Timo Werner hasn't played much football this season. He'd had 2 training sessions with new teammates, throwing straight in. So, yes, as I said, I know a lot of clubs can have say the same thing about the number of players they've got missing at the moment. But when you consider just how much Ange Postecoglou is having to reshuffle the pack with every single game, and you guys there were talking about identity. There is a clear identity. The fact that all those players, 12 first-team players they had missing yesterday, Tottenham, but the players who are left behind, they have all clearly bought into this ethos, this philosophy, this style of playing. And I think that's the really exciting thing from a Spurs point of view, that you just know you're going to get aggressive on the front foot football, always looking to take the game to the opposition. Even though yesterday, you're going to a place like Old Trafford, the old cliche, tough place to go, but Spurs dominated from start to finish, really.
Jamie, taking that all into account, is there a sense that it was a missed opportunity against United? Because, as you say, they dominated the game, they had the chances to win.
Yeah, it's one of those crazy things where it would have been, as somebody who grew up in the 90s when Manchester United were winning absolutely everything, it would have been unthinkable to sort of come away from Old Trafford ruining the fact that you didn't win the game. But I think Spurs were certainly the better team, and that said, they didn't create that many clear-cut chances, but I think they were certainly the better side. Ange Postecoglou was, saying after the game how it was one of the proudest he's been all season of that performance. From start to finish, they were just absolutely superb. And yeah, on another day, they could have found maybe nicked the winner. On another day, as Fraizer was saying there, perhaps Scott McTominay gets the winner right at the death. But that's kind of the roller coaster ride you're on with Spurs these days, that you just never really know what you're going to get in terms of the game itself. You know what you're going to get from the style of football, but every Tottenham game seems to just be bonkers from the first whistle to the last.
And that's actually one of the points I was going to make, Fraser, that Jamie talks about identity and the players buying in. It must be easy to buy in when it's fun. Because as a kid, what you love with football is you run around loads and you try and score loads of goals, which appears to be, with a lot more nuance than that, what Spurs are trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. You want to play some football, score the goals, but if your style of play is sitting deep and nicking a goal from a set piece, it's not fun. Like the old Stoke, for example, you wouldn't want to play in a team like that where it's a long ball. And
delighted to say that Tony Pulis joins us. No, carry on, Fraser.
I love Stoke. Love to watch them play. But you know what I mean? It's less pleasing on the eye. It might be effective, but my throat's gone here. It might be effective, but you want to play entertaining football, score goals, and that's what he's doing at Spurs, and it's great for them.
Well, I'll ask a long question now to allow you to have a sip of water, but
right.
About the playing stuff. Did you ever get or have a period where a changeover of manager freed you up as much as it appears to have freed up some Tottenham players, where there was someone who was a real breath of fresh air?
Well, I remember when I went to Spurs on loan, Ramos was the manager, and when he left, he was strict on diet, so there was no ketchup or anything. So when he got sacked, everyone was having ketchup. So that was a real relief. I'd love ketchup on my chips. But yeah, it happens. Sometimes, depending on your relationship with the manager, if you don't have a great relationship with him and he goes, there could be a group of players that certainly get a lift and they want to do well. But yeah, you can have the opposite effect. You might get a manager in that can't stand you, and then you're struggling.
I was expecting a real nuanced answer about going from a 4-4-2 to a 4-3-3 or inverted
right,
fullback.
okay.
He let us have ketchup. That's all you need to succeed as a manager.
Revelation about eating chips, by the way.
Yeah. This is why we get the ex-players on, because you can't get insight like that from anywhere. Jamie Weir never has chips and ketchup. He's a mackerel pate man. Jamie, when we talk as well about Ange Postecoglou and recruitment, I was listening to a Spurs fan last night saying, look, it's just nice to be signing players not on the 31st of January, but also signing players in Werner and Dragusin who appear to fit what Postecoglou wants to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from Ange Postecoglou's point of view, what's really important is the character of player that Tottenham are signing as well. He wants good eggs to come into the dressing room, people who buy into the project, who aren't going to cause him problems. Timo Werner is clearly, got the bit between his teeth. He hasn't played much football for Leipzig this season. He has a chance now to show the ability that he's got in the biggest league in the world. Radu Dragic had admirers at Bayern Munich, but he's chosen Tottenham over Bayern because Ange Postecoglou sold in the project. And, it's interesting. Clearly, Ange Postecoglou identifies these players, and Spurs' transfer business over the last few transfer windows now has been absolutely fantastic. They brought these players in early in January now as well, so Ange Postecoglou has this now 12-day gap until their FA Cup match against Manchester City to work with them a bit more, because both players were thrown straight in yesterday, having had very little time with their new teammates. I think they'd like to ideally get a midfielder this month as well. It's no secret that they're big admirers of Conor Gallagher. I think that might be a difficult transfer to happen, and whether Conor Gallagher really wants to leave his boyhood club where he's currently wearing the captain's armband to come and play at Tottenham, that's kind of a question mark as well. And as I said, I think Ange Postecoglou wants players in there who want to be at Tottenham, so I think that might be a difficult one to get done. I think it's kind of dependent whether Pierre-Emile Højbjerg is still a Spurs player come the 2nd of February as well. But what is really exciting is you look at a number of clubs now, even the top clubs, saying it's very difficult for us to do business at the moment. We have to sell players before we bring players in. A lot of Spurs fans, with some justification over the last few years, have been a bit critical of Daniel Levy for not sort of opening up the purse strings a bit more. But Tottenham is an extremely well-run club. And now at a time when you're seeing that FFP maybe does have some teeth, Spurs are pretty much the only club where it's not an issue at all. They're still able to bring in players because their turnover is so impressive. So, by being such a well-run club, Tottenham are now in a position where they really can kick on, and Ange Postecoglou's identified the missing parts to his jigsaw, and Spurs are going out there with the excellent recruitment team that they have and bringing in these players who straight away, look at Mickey van de Ven, look at even the cameo from Radu Dragic yesterday, they look like ready-made Premier League players. And you have to say that for Tottenham, who had sort of 4 years kind of scratching around under proven winners like Jose Mourinho and Antonio Conte doing nothing at all, there now seems to be a real project, a real sort of path going forward. Everybody's singing off the same hymn sheet, and that's incredibly exciting.
Yeah, I was going to ask Jamie, is that the excitement around the club at the moment? The fact that whatever happens this season, it's a more sustainable Spurs now. We're going to see them back challenging season after season after season because of the platform that they've got now.
It seems to be that, and there is clearly now a policy of bringing in young players as well and tying them down to these longer contracts. Look at the way Destiny Udogie has performed this season for Tottenham. Look at the way Pap Sarr has performed. Both of those guys have now signed contract extensions, with the exception really of Heung-min Son, who I think is now 30. All of them are basically 25 or younger in that squad, and they're all going to sort of be, I don't think they're in a title race this season, even though Ange Postecoglou sort of said on Friday when he was asked about it in his typical Ange Postecoglou kind of way, yeah, of course we are, mate. But, I'm not sure they absolutely are at the moment just yet. They've done incredibly well to be within touching distance of top of the table, having had the core of their team kind of stripped away for the last 10 games. And I think they'll only get stronger for this experience. But next season and the season beyond, I absolutely do expect them to be challenging for the title, because this young squad are only going to get stronger together. As I said, they've all brought into this ethos now that Ange Postecoglou's brought to the club. And in the space of 6 months, it seems to all be clicking. Well, 6 months and a further 6 months and a further 6 months down the line, they're only going to get better and better and better. So I think it's a really exciting time.
He sounds exactly like that, Jamie, as well. Just one more before we finish on this game.
I don't feel like I did my full Ange Postecoglou.
Don't bother.
I do a good Ange Postecoglou.
Just to finish off on this game, Fraizer, Arsenal and Tottenham level on 40 points at the moment, with Villa a few above them. Manchester United 32 points. Do you see any way that United can gate crash the top four?
Not really, no. If I'm totally honest, it's going to have to change a lot. There were signs yesterday that they might be able to start playing some decent football, but they're being far too inconsistent. They might get a couple of wins and then a few bad losses, and it's too up and down. They need to be more consistent. I think finishing in the top 6 would probably be more realistic.
Vinny O'Connor and Fraizer Campbell with me this week. Jamie Weir is going to stay with us for the next game as well as we head back into VAR Corner, our weekly feature. This time comes from Turf Moor with Vincent Kompany describing the decision to award Carlton Morris's late goal as ridiculous and as a joke. Let's rattle around in a word then. Vinny, goal or not? Yes or no?
Definitely not.
No.
Fraser? No. Jamie?
Definitely a goal. Keepers are far too overprotected these days. Nothing wrong with that.
Good. I'm glad you're here providing the argument for this. Fraser, is the acid test then that Luton didn't exactly wheel away off into Burnley Cricket Club when the header went in and those players maybe thought, we can see what's coming here?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I agree. The goalkeepers are far too protected. Normally in the box, you touch them, then it's a foul on them, but they clatter players for fun. So in that sense, I get what he's saying, but he's smashed into keeper there, and he probably would have caught the ball or at least got a touch on it, and he's just cleared it up for his mate to get a header.
Jamie?
No, I mean, James Trafford runs straight into him and falls down like a sack of spuds. You know, you've got to be stronger as a keeper. Whereas Fraser says you've got to go and clatter every attacker in your path if you're going to come and claim the ball. You know, keepers are far too overprotected. Nothing wrong with it at all, in my opinion.
Not in this case, Jamie. Sorry. He's not looking at the ball. He's played the keeper. It's a foul. And for me, if I'm Sean Dyche, I'm going to be absolutely fuming looking at that and wondering, how is that stood? How has VAR not even intervened and sent the referee to the screen to have a look at it after what happened at Spurs when Andre Gomez is penalised for a foul and Dominic Calvert-Lewin's goal is ultimately ruled out? Again, that was a VAR ruling, a VAR intervention sending the referee to the screen that day. The inconsistencies, again, there for all to see. For me, it's a foul. Goal shouldn't have stood.
Is one of the problems then, Fraser, that VAR are making decisions which are subjective? So therefore, Tony Harrington's the on-field referee, Peter Banks is the VAR. They just have a different view on what a foul constitutes. Yeah. Well, actually, they agree, but maybe if Michael Oliver's in there or whoever else, Anthony Taylor, they'd come up with something different.
Yeah, it's different people's opinions making the final decision, and everyone's got different opinions, and that's what's most frustrating, because one day you might get the free kick or the penalty or whatever, and the next week you won't. So I think that's what riles people. It's far too inconsistent. We're all seeing the same thing, but everyone's reading a different thing from it, and it's annoying mostly.
But in this very instant, lads, is that not the very point that, you know, we've just had a discussion there where I think it's a perfectly good goal. Both Vinny and Fraser think it should have been given as a foul. Now, do we want matches to be completely re-refereed, or do we want to give the on-field referee as much power as possible? So on the field, he didn't think it was a foul. He thought it was absolutely fine. It goes to the VAR. The VAR like, I can kind of see why you would give it as a foul, but it's one of those sort of 50-50 ones for me. So you stick with the on-field decision. Now, do we want to get to a position where the whole game is being re-refereed from 200 miles away in Stockley Park, or do we want to give the referees on the pitch as much power as possible?
And that is the point, Vinny, that we can use that famous old tagline, clear and obvious. There's enough disagreement in this room. There's been enough disagreement since Friday night to make you think it's not an absolute howler, is it? And therefore it should stand.
Well, that's where I agree with Jamie as well. And I think sometimes as well, the referees need to be stronger and say, actually, I feel my decision is still right. And therefore, I'm going to stick with what I initially went, even if he is sent to the screen. We saw, again, go back to Everton, the Dominic Calvert-Lewin red card against Crystal Palace in the FA Cup. And for me, there was no reason for the referee to overturn his decision. Chris Kavanagh is sent to the screen, looks at it, and then decides to change his mind. And then ultimately, it's then overturned on appeal. And that's a ridiculous situation because VAR is meant to make sure that it doesn't get as far as needing an appeal like that. So, yeah, that's where I agree with Jamie in that respect. There is a little bit too much re-refereeing going on. And therefore, yeah, if a referee's got the courage of his convictions, then stick with it.
As for where it leaves,
remarkable how many examples of Everton being aggrieved. That's
because it's more than most so far this season, Jamie.
And if you've missed an episode, you can listen back to Vinny last week also complaining about Everton VAR decisions. Anyway, as for the situation down at the bottom, Fraser, 5 points off safety now, Burnley. As a player in a dressing room, and unfortunately you've been in a team that's gone down, they conceded a 95th minute goal to lose at Villa, a penalty.
Yeah.
That goal again. Do you start to think as a squad, I don't like where this is going?
It can knock your confidence, yeah. A lot of the lads in the Burnley squad have never played in the Premier League before, so it's all a new experience. You know, they walked the league last season, playing the way they play, the certain type of football, and that worked. But you know, it's completely different kettle of fish in the Premier League, and they've got to learn how to get points on the board and quickly, because you know it's January now, and the end of the season's coming thick and fast, and without grinding out some results, they're going to be in a spot of bother. It's not impossible, but you know they need to start sooner rather than later.
When you talk about learning, a lot of people say, look, Vincent Kompany needs to try and compromise. They're trying to play nice football, which is admirable.
Yeah.
They've dropped 18 points now from winning positions. Only Brentford have dropped more. Do you just sometimes as a squad, even if you've got some good players in down at the bottom, have to accept, let's just roll our sleeves up and win a few horrible, ugly games?
Yeah, they'll be having crisis talks in the next couple of months where everyone's in the room saying, listen, we just need to win a game of football. It doesn't have to be pretty, it doesn't have to be nice. Forget the way we've been playing. We need to find a way to just, say if we're playing nice football, we take the lead, then it's, you know, batten down the hatches, every man behind the ball, and just scrap it out, because that's all it needs, really, because they are a good side. They have got some good players, got a good manager. They just need to learn to win some ugly games or keep the lead.
But Fraizer, do you think Vinny will change tack in any way? Because he gives me the impression that he just won't. He's got his idea and he's sticking to his principles.
Well, yeah, and that's, you know, if that's the way you want to go, then you've got to see how it plays out. And like I said, they have got the quality to win games of football. We've seen it, but you know, it's looking increasingly like Luton, for example. They played Luton, and Luton have got a style of play. It's not pretty. You know, the big teams go down there and they're walking through someone's back garden to get to the dressing rooms. It's horrible. Do you know what I mean? They're not in for a bad afternoon down there, and they've found a way to kind of intimidate these teams and nick wins and results and stuff. So I think their stance is looking more positive than Burnley trying to play their way out of trouble, because there's a lot of teams in this league that can play football with a lot of quality, so it's going to be more difficult. But as to your question, I don't think he's going to change his style of play, because I think that's what type of manager he is.
Fixture-wise, gets tricky for Burnley as well. Next 4 in the Premier League: away at Manchester City, home to Fulham, away to Liverpool, and at home to Arsenal. As for Luton then, Jamie, Fraizer talks there about making it difficult. They do things in their own way. They're not always going to win points for style, but they're making such a great fist of trying to stay up.
They're doing an incredible job, and they were, written off by so many people before a ball had even been kicked at the start of this season. But Rob Edwards has made them really hard to beat. They just work their absolute socks off. I think 14 of the 24 goals they've scored in the Premier League this season have come from beyond the 75th minute, which just shows how resilient they are, the fact that they just keep on going. And they've also been unlucky as well in a number of instances. Declan Rice scoring a winner with the last touch of the match when they played Arsenal at Kenilworth Road. Luis Diaz scoring a late equaliser for Liverpool when they played them at Kenilworth Road. So, they are in so many games. They're very rarely, only a couple of times have they been heavily beaten in the Premier League this season. Invariably, they're either, nick a point or nick a win or lose by just a single goal. So I think what they've done there is absolutely remarkable. They've done it on a shoestring. They've brought in good characters. You look at the likes of Andros Townsend, Ross Barkley, players who know the league and who've come in and just... Ross Barkley, it would be an unthinkable 6 months ago to think about Ross Barkley potentially being a wild card for the England squad with the Euros around the corner, but he just absolutely runs every single game every time I watch Luton these days, and I think the job they've done is absolutely extraordinary. I don't think you can question, of the 3 teams that came up, Luton have acquitted themselves best, and they were probably the ones who were written off straight away. And Fraizer, they're talking about different styles of football. I think they are trying to get more attractive and trying to play football the right way, but there's more than one way to skin a cat, and Luton have just shown that first and foremost, when you make yourself really, really tough to beat and you just dig in and grind out and absolutely just give 100% for the shirt, then that goes a long way in this league. And then if you can nick a goal and if you can add a little bit of quality, which is what they've tried to do, then I think Luton are still, certainly of the three that came up, the most likely to stay up. Yes, they're going to have a little bit of luck, and they're going to have to maybe hope that a Brentford or a Nottingham Forest gets sucked back into that relegation fight. But I think the job they've done is absolutely outstanding. And most importantly, from Luton Town fans, it wasn't that long ago they feared that club might completely cease to exist altogether. Financially, it is now set up for life. And it's just an incredible fairy tale story what's happening there.
Jamie, thank you very much. We will leave it there, Jamie. We're talking all things Luton and Tottenham. We're going to take a quick breather. When we come back, Stamford Bridge, Goodison Park and St James's. You are listening to Retrospect from Sky Sports News. Our reporter Vinny O'Connor and the former Manchester United and England striker Fraizer Campbell are with me this week. We're going to talk all things Everton next. A goalless draw with Aston Villa on the pitch on Super Sunday yesterday. Still 1 point outside the relegation zone. But, Vinny, are more problems off the pitch on the way?
Potentially. Obviously, what we're hearing is that Everton could be facing charges again when it comes to profit and sustainability rules, and an announcement is expected and we will then find out over the coming weeks exactly how that impacts Everton once again. There's various talk that it won't be a points deduction if they were to be found guilty, but again, it feeds into the underlying feeling amongst the fan base, amongst anyone really connected with the football club, that over a long period of time the club has not been run in the right way. They've had the opportunity to get things right. We know about the recruitment over a long period of time as well, and the money that's been spent and not been recouped, and the way the situation has unfolded as regards the stadium, and they've been reliant on Farhad Mashiri's millions to finance that stadium up to now, and that essentially has caused the football club a problem as well. So the takeover is still to go through. It's a very uncertain time for Everton once again, and still waiting the appeal on that 10-point deduction, and now potentially facing other charges. It just sums up off the pitch the way things have gone for them.
Do you get a sense that Sean Dyche was aware of what he was walking into when he took this job, in terms of how much turmoil there was above him and what might be coming down the road?
I think he knew to a certain extent. I don't think he could have predicted that a 10-point deduction was coming. I think it would have been sold to him, look, at this point where we believe we've done nothing wrong and therefore we won't be facing that kind of points deduction. And obviously that changed somewhat with Everton eventually admitting that they had been in breach, albeit they put forward a number of mitigating factors. And there was a slight change as well, in that at one point Everton were allowed to effectively write off against profit and sustainability rules that the payments on the stadium, but then of course that changed for the last financial year, which is why they found themselves in the predicament and why they found themselves facing that FA charge and subsequent 10-point deduction. So Sean Dyche has spoken to us numerous weeks and saying it's like a rodeo, this place. And he was kind of laughing a little bit about it, but every day seems to throw up something different. And again, this week potentially is going to do something similar as well. But all he says and continues to say, and I suppose it's created a bit of calmness in the dressing room as well, is that all that they can control are the controllables, and that is effectively making sure the players in the right frame of mind and in the peak condition to go out and put in performances on the pitch. And that's what they've done over a long period of time now under Sean Dyche. Yeah, there was a drop-off against Wolves. I think you can put that down to injuries catching up with them and the workload on the players that played against Wolves that day. But generally, even when they've not been getting results, and you mentioned the Spurs game earlier, the game against Manchester City as well, the performances have generally been good. I could highlight the Wolves' performance, like I said, and probably earlier this season away at Aston Villa. They're the two performances where Everton have let themselves down. I don't think you can really highlight any others.
Well, it might not just be Everton this time around. It could be Nottingham Forest as well, and there are full details on the Sky Sports website which explains in a bit more detail just how FFP and various charges work. You used the phrase earlier, excuses. I think we were talking about Manchester United, but they don't look like a group of players, Everton, that are being too bothered by everything that's going on. And I think it's one of those in football probably that you can make something an excuse if you want it to be an excuse.
Yeah, it would be an easy excuse, wouldn't it? We've lost 10 points. Because like you're saying, the majority of the season they've done really well. And without that, they'd be doing okay in the league. So I don't think Sean Dyche would let any of his players give excuses about the points. He seems the type of manager that's old school, just do your job, get to work, and we'll be fine. And by the looks of it looks like they will be fine. But yeah, you can't use it as an excuse because you can't do anything about it. You just got to win the games of football in front of you.
I don't think I've seen an Everton group as together as this group is in years. And we saw it again against Aston Villa. It was a really, really tough game. Villa, to be fair as well, they were up for the physical battle as well. And I think in the end it ended up being a really good hard-fought point for both sides. But that team spirit within Everton, I haven't seen a togetherness in the group like that in years at Goodison Park.
Yeah.
What's key for sort of getting away from a sticky situation down at the bottom? You're part of a Sunderland squad that had a great run under Martin O'Neill, weren't you? What was it about that propelled you from being in a bit of a mess to fairly comfortable by the end?
It's like you're saying, the togetherness. If you're together, you all stick together, you work hard, you know what you've got to do. You've got the players in the squad. It's just getting it out of each other, putting your arm around someone when they need their arm around them, working hard in training. And leaders, you have the leaders there, people that have maybe been through these experiences before that can help the ones that haven't. And it's just stick together. You're a good football team. You got the players. You can win the games. It's just sometimes people let the outside distractions cloud the judgment and they forget how good they are or how they are as a team. And I think it's important to just remember the basics, your core values, and I'm sure they'll be fine.
On the subject of leaders then, who were the sort of best men for a crisis when you were in and around the bottom?
Who did we have? We had Lorik Cana, remember him?
Yeah. It wasn't the name I was expecting to come out your mouth, to be honest.
Honestly, he was a hatchet man. I think he must have had out 4 red cards. We had Lee Catamall, who was same age as me, but he wore his pants up here and he acted like a...
More red cards.
Yeah, even more red cards. He acted like a 45-year-old man as well. We had a lot of leaders. Yeah, we had Sunderland. Who else do we have? There was Titus Bramble was there. Phil Bardsley was there. Craig Gordon.
On the managers, Martin O'Neill came in, and again, a man of great experience. And I know that Paolo Di Canio had sort of come in and saved the ship the year before, but was that all a bit too frantic and wild, and you needed someone to say, look, this is what we need to do, this is how we get out of it?
Yeah, well, I wasn't there with Paolo, so I couldn't tell you about that. But yeah, Martin's calm, and you've probably come across him. He's calm, he speaks well, and he's a bit, how to put it, eccentric. So he always keeps you thinking. You never know what he's thinking. Keeps you on your toes, kind of that kind of vibe. So and obviously his track record with Villa is first class. So he's got the pedigree. So the players listen to him, and he did a real good job with the lads in the dressing room.
Okay, let's talk about the Saturday evening game where Manchester City closed the gap on Liverpool at the top of the Premier League table by coming from behind to win late on at Newcastle. 3-2 it finished. We discovered, Fraizer Campbell, that Kevin De Bruyne is quite good.
He is all right, yeah.
Yeah.
He had he did a little bit of work for 15 minutes. Got the result for the team. But no, it was sensational. You could hear the fans going crazy when he kicked. I was at the cup game, the Huddersfield Town game, the week before, and he was warming up, and you could feel the buzz round the place because obviously that's how good he is, and he looked like he was desperate to get on the score sheet there. So when he come on at Newcastle, and it was a clever finish through the legs, so he just kind of passed it into the corner, and the assist was textbook him. It was. He's back.
What do you think about, the big question is, what do you think about his hair?
I don't like it.
Okay.
No, I don't like it. I don't like Man City, so I don't really want to say anything positive about them.
Well, you're going to have to, afraid. So we're going to carry on talking about Kevin De Bruyne. But were there certain midfielders that you played with who just thought, if I make the run, he's going to find me?
Yeah, I didn't play so much with the likes of Scholes and that, but in training, you knew. You didn't even. Some players, I've got to look at you, I've got to shout at you, and then you might pass me the ball. But with players like that, you didn't even have to look at him. I just seen that he was getting it, peel or make a run, and then just wait for the ball to arrive. Because, when you've got that type of player behind you, especially as a forward, it's perfect because it's save your lungs, because you save that for running, and it can make you look really good. And all you've got to do is run into a space. Obviously, I was at Spurs with Modric, similar kind of
player.
Yeah, fantastic player. Where else? Steve Malbronk as well. He was really good on the ball. He was at Spurs and at Sunderland with me.
I tell you what, Steve Malbronk, if he's listening, will be thrilled to be in the same category as Paul Scholes and Luka Modric. He owes you a couple of quid or a drink there, doesn't he?
I spoke to him before. But yeah, those type of players that always want to pass the ball forward are always a joy to play with, or especially in front of.
It's starting to, or is it starting to look a bit ominous, City, with De Bruyne back? They're in this run, they're winning without Haaland, and if you're Jurgen Klopp, you might be forgiven for thinking, here they come again.
Yeah, possibly. I don't think Jurgen will be thinking like that, though. I think when you look at it, he'll be up for the challenge now.
Definitely.
It's set up so perfectly now in this second part of the season. I'm really looking forward to it. I thought it was a great game the other night. I love that footwork from Oscar Bob for the winner. It was just so good. It's just, for me, it's one of the big moments of the weekend.
You nearly
celebrated. Yeah, I was like off my chair.
It was like my initial reaction was, oh my word, that is just brilliant.
Yeah.
It's just, I love moments like that. And for me, that is just typified what we've got to look forward to now in this title race in the back end of the season.
Well, let's talk about things from a Newcastle perspective. Our reporter, and I believe now full-time dog trainer, Keith Downey, is with us, taking some time off to train his puppy, apparently, Vinny. Hello, Keith. How would you sum up that weekend and that game from a Newcastle perspective? The poor form continues.
Rob, firstly, the puppy was running about mad until he heard me join the call, and I think you guys have put him to sleep. So thanks for doing my job for me.
Thanks, Keith. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, next.
Look, I was at the game on Saturday. Really, firstly, on Man City, interesting to hear what Fraser's saying there, because when De Bruyne emerged from the subs bench, he actually stood there. Well, firstly, when he emerged from the subs bench, I thought it was Jack Grealish had dyed his hair ginger. And then when he took off his tracksuit top, and I realised it was actually Kevin De Bruyne, that you thought, here we go. And you could actually see his Man City teammates who were on the pitch all turning around, realising he was about to come on, and you almost could see them getting a lift from that on the pitch at the time. And then, as you guys rightly say, that cameo for 20 odd minutes was unbelievable. Who needs Kevin De Bruyne for 90 minutes when he can do that in 25 minutes? So look, it was a privilege to see that in person. From a Newcastle point of view, look, the results haven't been good, but that performance, particularly in the first half against the champions, shows that they are getting back to where they were last season. Look, they've been beset by injuries this season. I've spoke about it a number of times on here and on Sky Sports News, and it felt like they were just getting out of that. Like, it looked as though they were getting a few back in the shape of Isak and Botman and Joe Linton. Of course, Joe Linton's picked up another injury now. But they're back to now double figures, 10 players missing, including Tonali, who, of course, all we know is out until next August, suspended. And it feels like they're getting through it, but at the same time, the games are easing for them a little bit. So they've gone from playing 10 matches in 30 days in December to now playing every week, and you can see the energy is coming back. But they just didn't have the energy to compete with Manchester City, and they didn't have the subs either. You looked at the subs benches yesterday, and Saturday, should I say. City bring on De Bruyne. They've got Grealish there, who never even managed to get off the bench, apparently been ill during the week, and then Oscar Bob coming on and making a name for himself like that. Eddie Howe turned to the Newcastle bench. He had a couple of youngsters. He had a couple of defenders in the shape of Lascelles and Dummett, and he had 2 goalkeepers on the bench. And that lack of strength and depth to cover for the amount of injuries they've had over the last 5 or 6 weeks, without doubt, has cost them. But what I will say is, it feels like they're getting back there, and I think any Newcastle United fan who left that match on Saturday could not be too annoyed with the performance, because they matched Manchester City for a good 70 minutes. But it was just the brilliance of Kevin De Bruyne and the emergence of Bob in those last couple of minutes that nicked the 3 points.
Just give us a bit of context then on firstly what Darren Eales had to say about recruitment and the transfer policy last week, and also Eddie Howe on Friday when he says we've not got many friends in the transfer market and therefore loans are going to be a problem as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a low market that they're looking to this January purely because they're so close to their financial fair play regulations. I mean, Newcastle have spent over £400 million since the takeover was pushed through in October 2021. So they've spent that. They've only sold a couple of players, Alan St-Maximin and Chris Wood, to the tune of around about £35 million. So they're buying players all the time, but they're not selling, so they're not trading. You look at Man City in recent years, they've sold Zinchenko, Jesus, Sterling, even Cole Palmer in the summer there, Mahrez going over to Saudi. You look at Aston Villa, Newcastle fans say to me all the time, how are Aston Villa managing to sign Diaby and Diego Carlos, etc.? Well, because they sold Jack Grealish and they're trading. Newcastle haven't been able to do that. Spurs, they sold Harry Kane for £100 million. They're reinvesting that money into the squad now with the players that they're signing. Newcastle haven't done that. So that's one of the reasons that it's costing. The second is the revenue. They posted their financial results last week, a turnover of £250 million. Manchester City's turnover last year, and this is before you take into account that they've won the Champions League, was 715 million. So it's almost 3 times as much. And until Newcastle get to that level, they're not going to be able to match them on the field. But it's a little bit like the chicken or the egg, what comes first, because you can't match them on the field until you get the players in. So it's a difficult situation for them. In terms of the January transfer window, they're having to look at loans. But as you rightly say, Rob, Eddie Howe mentioned that a couple of times on Friday. He says, we've not got any friends there. And what I take from that is they've tried to potentially get a couple of loans in already and they're being rebuffed. Calvin Phillips is their number 1 target. I just feel that as the window goes on, I feel there's more and more chance of that happening. I think I think we all know that Calvin Phillips is going to move this January, and I think Newcastle's one competition would be from another club coming in rather than him staying at Manchester City. So the longer the window goes on, without him moving to a Juventus or elsewhere, I think Newcastle will be given more encouragement, and I think Manchester City will want to help Calvin Phillips. He's not played in a year and a half. He wants to play for England in the Euros in the summer, and I think that is a deal that Newcastle could do. But from my information from Newcastle, it would have to be a loan deal with either an option or an obligation for the summer. And what they're then doing is they're taking money from the summer budget, like what we saw them do with Anthony Gordon last January. They're going to have to do similar again. But look, it's difficult because people look and talk about Newcastle as the richest club in the world. They would be the richest club in the world if there was no financial fair play. But with financial fair play, they've got the money there, they've got the resources there, but they've been blocked from using it. And I can imagine within the corridors of power at Newcastle right now, including the management, it's a very, very frustrating situation because the money's there, but due to the nature of the setup with FFP, they can't spend it.
Just further to that then, Keith, could they have done more to manage the situation in terms of the finances by moving players on and therefore creating funds to move in the transfer market? Or is it purely there is that great deal of frustration that profit and sustainability rules are hindering them now from effectively building on what they achieved last season?
Well, when Eddie Howe arrived at the club a month after the takeover, they didn't really have too many assets. Alan St-Maximin was seen as really the only one. You've got to look, guys like Joe Willett, guys like Sean Longstaff, Fabian Schär, who have all been transformed by Eddie Howe. Joe Linton's another one. None of them were playing well, so there weren't really any clubs looking at these players at the time. Now, what Eddie Howe has done is he's improved a number of them, the lads that they've just mentioned. So all these players have got a value now, and then they've brought in the likes of Isak, Botman, Bruno Guimaraes for big money. So these guys are now assets for the club. The problem is the last 3 that I mentioned there, Botman, Bruno Guimaraes and Isak, they're the core of the team. So for them to lose one of them, it would be a hammer blow. But I think what both Darren Eales and Eddie Howe were trying to say last Thursday, Friday, they were almost just giving the fans a little bit of a warning just to say, look, this could happen in the future. Now, look, I don't think that's going to happen in this month, but I think what they're doing is they're paving the way for the summer or potentially this time next year for a big name to be sold, so they can then create the headroom to spend and reinvest and maybe bring in 2 or 3 players. So, look, they do have assets now. I think when Eddie Howe arrived at the team, they didn't have assets. They needed to spend money quickly because they were in a relegation battle at that time. And it's just a sad indictment of the way the club was left by Mike Ashley. He gave a lot of players long-term contracts, and you see the ramifications of that now, because you've got guys like Matt Ritchie there who doesn't play at all, sitting there in a long-term deal. There's other players like that as well who were given long deals by Mike Ashley because he didn't want to go out and spend money by buying players, and it was a bit like tried and tested. He also knew the takeover was in the offing, was probably going to go through within the year or within a 6-month period. So he gave these players long-term deals to stay, and it's handcuffing the current owners because the club was in a poor situation. They had to go out and spend, but there was no saleable assets for them. So I think they feel very much like they're taking one step forward and going 2 back. And it's very similar with the injury situation as well. As I say, it was beginning to clear up. And then arguably the most influential player, particularly in a transition game like that against Manchester City at the weekend, Joe Linton, is now out for the next 6 to 8 weeks. And I think due to that injury, I think that is going to accelerate their need to bring in a midfielder between now and the end of the window. I would be amazed if they do nothing in January.
We will let you get back to the dog training. Keith, thank you very much.
Cheers, guys.
Just before we touch on Chelsea to finish, I wanted your memories of sort of transfer windows, and you were sort of chatting before you came on air about how you were almost a Wigan player and Tottenham swooped in right at the last minute.
Yeah, so it was the season Berbatov went from Spurs to Man United. I was with the England under 21s at the time with my agent, my dad, and Steve Bruce, because was waiting for the facts. You know, it's
the facts. Those
old
the
school.
You're showing your age there, Campbell.
Yeah, the old school facts to come through to sign, so I could go on loan to Wigan for the season. And time's pushing on. It's taking, the facts took a long time anyway, but it was taking extremely long. But it was getting close to the deadline, and I get a phone call from a withheld number, thinking, who's this? So I'll just answer it just in case it's something to do with it. So I answered it, I was like, hello. He said, Fraizer, it's the boss, Sir Alex, obviously. So we've got a deal here to sign Berbatov, £32 million, I think it was. And it's not going to go through unless you agree to go to Spurs on loan. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to think about it, and then I'm going to ring you back with your answer. All right, okay. I just put the phone down. All right. And they're like, who's that? Steve was like, who's that? So
you might know him, Steve. Yeah.
I think you've come across him a couple of times in the past. I was like,
and is that one of those, you've got 2 minutes to think about it, but you're saying yes, there is no choice.
I don't know why he said he needed 2 minutes.
No pressure.
The manager rings you and tells you this is happening. You go in. I was like 20 years old at the time. I was like, yeah, rang him back, said, yeah, okay, I'll go. And that was it. But I was sat with Steve Bruce, and he was like, oh no, you'd have played a lot more football at Wigan with me. And I was like, yeah, I probably would have, but I don't have a choice.
Yeah. And
sorry, Rob, was that also with a view to thinking, if I go to Spurs, I'll get the opportunity to go back to United and there's a greater chance of having a career? Or because if you'd have said no to Sir Alex, then
well, yeah,
that could have been the end anyway.
Well, exactly, yeah. So I'm a Man United player. My dream is to play in the first team, to hopefully get a position there and play all my career there. That's the end goal. So going on loan is just to gain experience and get me closer to being ready to play for the team. So when the manager rings and says, I'd like you to go here, it's probably in your best interest to listen to him. So yeah, I went.
So is it exciting? Is it stressful?
It was exciting because I was only 20 years old. It's deadline day. You're watching all the Sky Sports news.
Of course
breaking
you are, yeah,
news,
good plug.
And I'm sat on looking at the clock thinking, oh, only half an hour to go. Where's this fax? But yeah, it was exciting, but yeah, it didn't end up where I thought it was going to go, but I had a great time at Spurs.
Let's just finish with one of Spurs' rivals then, Chelsea. 3 straight Premier League wins for the first time this season, beating Fulham 1-0. Are you convinced? Do they look to you as though they're making progress or not?
No, not really, no. I don't. Again, another team that I don't really like, Chelsea. The two, I don't know. They've got the players. Like Cole Palmer's come in and he's looking really good. Sterling's come there in the summer and he's looked good for parts. But they've not been. I don't know. They're not blowing me away. There's something about them that I'm not too convinced about. But I think over time the manager is, he's a brilliant manager. He will get the best out of them. But for the time being, I'm not overly convinced on how they won 3 games, last 3 games. At the minute, they're doing well, and hopefully, for them, hopefully, I hope it continues.
Does some of that inconsistency come back to that conversation about leadership we had earlier? There doesn't seem to be the Scholes or the Giggs or the Carrick, at Chelsea. Yeah. Everyone's very much young and green and inexperienced.
Yeah, and you look at the Chelsea team, successful Chelsea teams over time. You've had your Lampards, your Terrys, people who have been in the Premier League long time. They know the English game inside out. It's them real leaders. And obviously you've got Thiago Silva there at the back. Obviously he's immense, but he's not been in the Premier League for a long time. Obviously he knows a lot about football, but they've got a lot of youngsters, like I say, and relying on them heavily. Reece James, great player, captain, but he's struggling with his injuries and stuff, unfortunately. Raheem, he's a fantastic player, but I wouldn't say he was a leader character. He might lead by example, for example, but he's not going to be vocal, demanding. So I think you need a mixture of both. You need a lot of youth for the legs mainly, but you need the old heads to try and guide everyone and keep the ship steady. So you're not winning a game, losing a game, winning 3, losing 2. You need to be more consistent. And Chelsea's obviously a massive football club, and they should be doing better than they have been for the majority of this season.
Just before we let you go, then, is retirement agreeing with you?
Yeah, I'm booked in the Spa this afternoon.
Beautiful. You've been booked in the Spa as a player, I imagine.
I'm enjoying it. I've got 3 young kids, so they're keeping me super busy. And I get chances to come across and speak to people like you and have a little chat, glass of water.
Yeah, that's all we can offer, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I was hoping there would be a little snack bar.
Some weeks there are. Steve Bruce got a full buffet breakfast last week, but
I was talking about Steve before. Have you got his headphones on still? Yeah.
When you've got ears like mine, it's a bit all right.
We'll work on the buffet for next time,
Right,
Fraizer.
okay.
Thank you very much indeed. Lots coming up this week on Sky Sports in terms of their football. Still that split winter break, but we might be able to see Ivan Toney's return for Brentford against Nottingham Forest on the Saturday night football. The NFL playoffs get underway this weekend as well, and a big night of live boxing as well on Saturday on Sky Sports and on Now TV, as well as Natasha Jonas takes on Michaela Mayer. Lots of podcasts available for you from Sky Sports. Transfer Talk with Pete Graves and Dharma Sheth. You can like and subscribe this one wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch in full as well on YouTube, and we're back next week. Bye for now.